Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Next up, we have a classic I Don't Work Here tale with a hilarious twist. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Turns out wearing fire department gear isn't enough to convince Karen I don't work here. This happened a couple of years ago, but I still laugh when I think of it. I live in the southeastern U.S., I work for a large municipal fire department, and at the time worked as a fire inspector. This meant that I was in uniform on my way to work and, of course, on my way home. There's a grocery store just up the street from my house, and I would frequently stop there to pick up milk or something for dinner on my way home. The company colors are green, so naturally the store uniform is a green polo shirt and green apron. One day I was in an aisle with my back turned to the aisle as I compared two different products, nothing that millions of other people haven't done and don't do daily. In the background I hear, "Oh good, you're doing inventory." I don't really pay attention to it as I was doing my own thing. From behind me I hear a pointed, "Sir, are you doing inventory?" along with an exaggerated throat clearing. I turned around to find a lady holding a can of something or other. I looked at her and said, "Ma'am," because I wasn't sure I'd heard her correctly. Mind you, and as I said above, I was in full uniform. That consists of work pants, boots, a gray polo shirt with a Maltese cross that's our emblem on the front, and Sesame Street-sized letters on the back stating blank fire department. If that wasn't enough, I had a radio strap across my chest with a day-glow yellow radio and hand mic that was, at the time, dispatching a multi-apparatus call. She looked me right in the face and said, "You're doing inventory. You're out of blank," whatever product she was holding. I said, "Ma'am, I don't work here. I work for the fire department." She gave me a semi-blank stare and wandered off. Sometimes I wonder and worry about the citizenry I serve. My favorite quote is, "Most people are wrong about most things most of the time." It offended me slightly the first time I heard it, but then as I reflected on it and really thought about what it was saying, it makes sense. And our second story. Neighbor learns the hard way, no survey means no claim, especially in Texas. I purchased 6 acres in the Texas Hill Country about a year ago, determined to homestead at my own pace. Each new project, building raised beds, setting up solar panels, or wiring inverters inside a repurposed shipping container, was something I approached methodically. Rather than rushing, I researched and took my time, ensuring each step was done correctly. Part of the appeal of this land was its peace and seclusion. My neighbors were few and far away. Everything was quiet, but for the occasional rustle of the wind in the trees or the sound of a distant coyote at night, it felt almost idyllic. Right up until the afternoon, I discovered just how quickly a neighborly dispute can spark. That day, I was wiring up my solar inverters inside a container near the eastern edge of my property. The boundary line in that area can be confusing because of the uneven terrain, so even before I started placing structures or clearing brush, I had a professional survey done. We marked the corners with rebar and bright ribbons, leaving no question about where my property ended and anyone else's began. Suddenly, a man's voice echoed through the trees, cutting through the silence. "Hey!" he bellowed. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" I stepped out of the container, surprised to see a middle-aged man marching towards me, his face creased with anger. I recognized him as someone who lived on the adjacent parcel, though I'd never actually met him before. "Excuse me?" I replied, trying to keep calm. "I think there's some confusion." "There's no confusion," he snapped, jabbing a finger in my direction. "You're trespassing." Up to this point, I'd enjoyed a straightforward relationship with my land. I had the official paperwork and survey. I knew exactly where my lines were, and everything I'd built was comfortably inside them. Looking past him, I saw the bright plastic marker in the ground, the same one the surveyors had placed. I gestured toward it. "Let's go check that boundary pin," I suggested. "It'll clear things up." His scowl deepened, but after a brief pause, he followed me. Together, we walked to the corner where the metal stake was still firmly in place, paint and ribbon visible despite dust and weeds. "There," I said. "See? According to my survey, my projects, including this shipping container, sit well within my side of the line." He folded his arms and glared. "I don't care what that says. I know my property and you're on it." I fought down a rising tide of frustration. "All right," I said slowly, "then maybe we can compare it to your survey. If there's a discrepancy, we'll figure out which markers are right." He hesitated, eyes darting away. "I don't have a survey," he muttered, "but I know this is my land." It took me a moment to fully register what he was saying. "So you're confronting me about property lines without having any survey of your own?" The sheer absurdity of it made me lose my temper. "That's incredible," I said. "You might be the dumbest person I've met in my 53 years. In that instant, I realized the conversation wasn't heading anywhere productive. He stiffened, shooting me a look that bordered on murderous, but I'd already said my piece. I told him to leave my land. When he refused and kept ranting about how I was trespassing on his property, I stepped back, locked up the container, and called the local sheriff's office. A deputy arrived before long. He listened to both sides, examined my paperwork, and noted the matching pins out on the boundary. My neighbor repeated his claim that he needed no survey to know his own land, but the deputy shook his head. He told me a trespass warning could be issued, and if my neighbor set foot on my property again without permission, I could press charges. Grumbling, my neighbor turned and disappeared back into the trees. I stood there, heart pounding, frustrated and embarrassed. The incident was loud enough that any nearby residents, few as they were, might have heard the shouting match. I'd come here for the isolation, not to get into public disputes. With a sigh, I reminded myself that at least I'd done everything legally. The survey was in my hand and on record. Still, the confrontation rattled me. I'd originally planned to keep my boundaries open, hoping deer and other wildlife could move about freely, and figuring a fence wasn't really necessary in such a rural spot. But after this confrontation, I decided I didn't want to risk a repeat scenario. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously planned a fence line, setting it about a foot inside my boundary, so there'd be no question about who owned it. I bought enough fence posts and rolled wire to stretch along the length of our shared property line. It was a big project, especially with Texas's rocky soil, but it felt like a protective move, both physically and legally. Day after day, I dug post holes, mixed concrete, and braced each section. Occasionally, I'd spot my neighbor from the corner of my eye standing on his side of the property, watching me with arms crossed. He never said anything, and I never paused my work. Despite the potential tension, he stayed on his side, and I stayed on mine. Bit by bit, the fence took shape. Sturdy steel posts topped with wire mesh, anchored at each corner in deep concrete footings. I even added a couple of gates, in case I needed to pass through or access the perimeter. Once it was complete, I could look down the entire run and feel relief. Now there could be no more disputes about where my property ended and his began. The act of building the fence gave me a sense of closure. I might not ever be on friendly terms with that neighbor, but at least the boundary was crystal clear. There was no need for him to wander onto my land, ranting about lines that were never his to begin with. After the fence was finished, a few weeks went by with no incidents, no yelling, no new accusations, no stomping over unannounced. A sense of calm returned to my homestead. The only noises at day's end were the crickets, the hum of the solar rig, and occasionally the hens clucking in their coop. Meanwhile, the shipping container with my inverters was still right where it belonged, on my property, just as the survey said. I often think back to how quickly the situation escalated that day and how easily misunderstandings can arise when people don't verify land boundaries properly. There's a lesson to be learned about preparation and documentation, one I'm glad I took seriously when I first bought this acreage. A professional survey isn't cheap, but it's worth every cent if it keeps you out of endless disputes. Now, whenever I see that neighbor's roofline in the distance or catch a glimpse of his truck passing down his driveway, I feel a twinge of lingering resentment. The memory of his aggression and me losing my temper isn't pleasant, but at least I can rest assured that should he ever try to resurrect this feud, the fence stands as a firm reminder that the land belongs to me, and I have the proof to back it up. Over time, I'm hopeful the tension will fade. I prefer a quiet, self-sufficient lifestyle, and maybe, with the boundaries clearly defined, there will be no reason for him to bother me again. The Texas Hill Country's big enough for both of us. As long as he stays on his side of the fence, I'll remain on mine, free to continue homesteading in peace, building the life I've always wanted out here among the rolling hills and boundless skies. Honestly, there's nothing worse than buying land specifically for its peace and solitude, only to have a neighbor start a needless dispute out of ignorance or entitlement. It's amazing how some people confidently charge into arguments without having their facts straight. Your neighbor being a prime example. And our last story. When entitlement meets evidence. Karen versus my property rights. I came home to find a note of Karen neighbor she had hand-posted into my letterbox. It wasn't in an envelope, and saw her on my doorbell camera do this. I had problems with this Karen over my driveway since I moved in my house in February 2023. Also other problems with her on other things, and my other neighbors had past similar problems too. First time I met her is when she tried to tow my car out of my driveway on the first day of me starting to move into my new house. I heard a loud bang right in front of my house. I went to check and saw a tow truck lining up to my car on my driveway, police officers, and Karen. I shouted from my front door and got police and Karen attention. Our decision was basically, 1, Karen came home to find unrecognized car in her spot and called police straight away instead of knocking on my front door. 2, Karen didn't know that new house owner had started to move in. 3, she had a deal with previous owner of my house who didn't drive to let Karen use the single-car driveway. 4, she believes that deal should still be honored, but since I'm the new owner and don't know anything about it, that deal is over. Had problems with her still parking in my driveway and stopped after I got it towed. After I'd extended my driveway to fit 2 cars side by side, still in front of my house and not going over any property lines, Karen demanded the second spot of my driveway. After I said no, she had the nerve to still go ahead and use that second spot. She stopped again after I towed it again. Also, she had attempted to tow my girlfriend's car from my driveway. Now on to this note from Karen. In her note, she doesn't ask to use my driveway for her guests. It says she has already arranged for her guests to use my driveway from March 20th to April 2nd. She basically told me to park on the street so her guests can use both spots, also not to unnecessarily tow their cars. I just been over to her house and reminded her it's my driveway. She has not got any authority to let others use my driveway and said the second I see unauthorized cars in my driveway, I will get them towed off. She said she'll call the police. I just said go ahead and send the police to my house when they turn up. I got Ring doorbell that has footage of me telling Karen no on her using my driveway in the past. Also got cameras on my driveway with footage of the past problems with her. I still got the note about her guests using my driveway. She's called the police on me for parking in my own driveway and the both times I towed her car off my driveway. I think this is great. Just continue to tow them all and laugh about it with the drivers. Damn, you might even be able to strike up a deal with the tow company. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.